The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty courtyard of the captured Italian supply depot in Benghazi, Libya, on March 15, 1942. Captain Harold Pemberton of the British 8th Army's Intelligence Corps stood ankle-deep in scattered paperwork, his wire-rimmed spectacles reflecting the harsh North African light as he surveyed what appeared to be the most mundane discovery of the entire desert campaign. Around him, soldiers kicked at endless stacks of invoices, fuel receipts, and maintenance logs with visible disgust, muttering about the waste of time spent cataloging administrative debris instead of pursuing the legendary Desert Fox himself. What none of them realized was that these seemingly worthless scraps of paper would soon unravel one of the most carefully guarded secrets of the German Afrika Korps, proving that sometimes the most devastating intelligence comes not from captured battle plans, but from the tedious bookkeeping that armies cannot function without. Before we dive into this story, make sure to subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. Within 48 hours, Pemberton's meticulous analysis of these forgotten documents would expose the intricate fuel supply network that kept General Erwin Rommel's forces mobile across the vast expanses of North Africa, ultimately leading to one of the most decisive logistical victories of the entire conflict. Pemberton had never intended to become a military intelligence officer. Before the conflict erupted, he had spent 14 years as a senior accountant for Barclays Bank in Manchester, where his colleagues often joked that he could spot a misplaced penny from across a crowded office. His reputation for finding discrepancies in the most complex financial records had earned him both respect and gentle mockery from his peers, who dubbed him the human calculator for his ability to detect patterns where others saw only chaos. When conscription swept him into His Majesty's forces in 1941, the army quickly recognized that his particular talents were better suited for analysis than artillery, and within 6 months he found himself attached to the Intelligence Corps in Cairo, tasked with making sense of captured enemy documents. The supply depot in Benghazi had fallen to British forces during Operation Crusader, but the retreating German and Italian forces had left behind what appeared to be nothing more than administrative clutter. Major Geoffrey Thornton, Pemberton's commanding officer, had initially assigned the document review as a routine exercise, expecting little more than confirmation of already known troop movements and equipment inventories. The depot itself was unremarkable, a collection of corrugated metal warehouses and concrete bunkers that had served as a logistics hub for Axis forces operating along the coastal highway between Tripoli and Tobruk. As Pemberton began sorting through the first batch of papers on that sweltering March morning, the scope of the discovery became apparent. The document spanned 18 months of operations, from the initial German deployment to North Africa through the most recent winter campaigns. There were fuel delivery schedules, maintenance records for thousands of vehicles, spare parts inventories, and detailed accounting logs that tracked every liter of gasoline, every kilogram of lubricating oil, and every tire replaced across the entire Afrika Korps motor pool. Lance Corporal James Mitchell, assigned as Pemberton's assistant, struggled to understand why they were spending precious time cataloguing what he considered glorified grocery lists. "Sir, with all due respect," Mitchell said on the second morning, sweat already beading on his forehead despite the early hour, "wouldn't our time be better spent interrogating prisoners or analyzing captured maps? These fuel receipts aren't exactly going to tell us where Rommel plans to attack next." Pemberton looked up from a particularly detailed inventory list, his eyes bright with the kind of excitement that only a born accountant could feel when confronted with perfectly organized data. "On the contrary, Mitchell," he replied, carefully arranging several documents on his makeshift desk constructed from ammunition crates. "These records tell us something far more valuable than battle plans. They tell us exactly how much fuel the German Afrika Korps consumes, where that fuel comes from, and most importantly, how much they can afford to lose before their entire mechanized force becomes immobile." The first breakthrough came when Pemberton noticed an anomaly in the fuel consumption patterns recorded during the previous autumn's operations. According to the official German logistics manual they had captured months earlier, a Panzer III tank consumed approximately 150 liters of fuel per 100 kilometers of movement. However, The actual consumption figures recorded in the depot's maintenance logs showed consistently higher usage, sometimes exceeding 200 litres per 100 kilometres. Initially, Pemberton assumed this discrepancy reflected the harsh conditions of desert warfare, where sand and heat placed additional strain on mechanical systems. But as he continued analysing the data, a different pattern emerged. The excessive fuel consumption was not random or weather-related. It followed specific geographical routes and correlated directly with particular supply convoy schedules. Working late into the night by the light of a kerosene lamp, Pemberton spread detailed maps of the North African coastline across his desk and began plotting the fuel consumption data against known German positions and movements. What he discovered made him forget about the scorching heat, the persistent flies, and the monotonous diet of tinned meat and hardtack that had defined his existence for the past 8 months. The German Afrika Korps was not simply consuming fuel, it was systematically stockpiling enormous quantities at hidden supply dumps scattered across the desert, far from the coastal highway where British air attacks posed constant threats. The excessive consumption figures represented fuel that was being diverted from normal operations and transported to these concealed depots, creating a vast network of strategic reserves that would allow Rommel's forces to launch sustained operations deep into British-controlled territory. Pemberton's analysis revealed that the Germans had established at least 12 major fuel depots between Sirte and El Agheila, each containing enough gasoline to support a full armoured division for 2 weeks of continuous operations. The total strategic reserve amounted to over 3 million litres of fuel, enough to support a massive offensive that could potentially reach the Suez Canal if launched under optimal conditions. The implications were staggering. British intelligence had consistently underestimated German fuel reserves, assuming that Rommel's forces operated on a hand-to-mouth basis, with supplies arriving just in time to support immediate operations. The reality, as revealed by Pemberton's ledger analysis, was that the Afrika Korps possessed the logistical capability for a sustained campaign of unprecedented scope and duration. But the accountant's most crucial discovery was yet to come. As he continued cross-referencing fuel delivery schedules with convoy movement reports, Pemberton identified the supply route that connected these hidden depots to the main German supply base in Tripoli. The route did not follow the obvious coastal highway, where British naval forces and desert air patrols maintained constant surveillance. Instead, it traced a carefully planned path through the interior desert, following a chain of oases and natural landmarks that provided both water and concealment for the massive truck convoys that moved under cover of darkness. The route began at the port facilities in Tripoli, where fuel tankers from Italy unloaded their cargo into specially modified German transport vehicles. These convoys, traveling exclusively at night and maintaining strict radio silence, moved southeast into the desert, before turning northeast toward a series of carefully surveyed waypoints. The total journey covered over 400 kilometers of harsh terrain, but it kept German supplies completely invisible to British reconnaissance aircraft and naval patrols. Sergeant William Davies, the unit's radio operator, initially expressed skepticism when Pemberton briefed him on the discovery. "Sir, you're suggesting that the Germans are running a major supply operation through some of the most inhospitable desert on Earth," Davies said, adjusting his headset as he prepared to transmit Pemberton's report to headquarters in Cairo. "Wouldn't it be simpler to use the coastal road and accept occasional losses to our air attacks?" Pemberton shook his head, pointing to a detailed chart he had constructed showing fuel delivery tonnages versus convoy losses over the previous year. "The numbers tell a different story, Davies," he explained. "German losses to British air attacks along the coastal highway averaged 23% of total shipments. By contrast, losses along this interior route appear to be virtually zero. The Germans are willing to accept the additional time and complexity of desert navigation in exchange for guaranteed delivery of their strategic reserves." The revelation transformed British understanding of German capabilities and intentions in North Africa. Within 72 hours of receiving Pemberton's report, RAF headquarters in Cairo had repositioned 3 squadrons of fighter bombers to airfields capable of reaching the newly identified supply route. Royal Navy patrol boats received orders to intercept fuel tankers departing Italian ports, and British ground forces began planning operations to locate and destroy the hidden depot network. The first test of Pemberton's analysis came on March 22nd, when RAF Hurricanes conducting reconnaissance along the suspected supply route photographed a convoy of 47 German trucks moving northeast through the desert. The convoy was precisely where Pemberton's calculations had predicted, traveling at the speed and time that his schedule analysis had indicated. The subsequent air attack eliminated 31 vehicles and destroyed over 200,000 litres of fuel intended for Rommel's strategic reserves. Flight Lieutenant Christopher Wilson, who led the attack, later described the scene in his combat report. The enemy convoy was completely exposed in open desert, with no possibility of concealment or evasion. They appeared to be following a predetermined route with mathematical precision, making them ideal targets for coordinated bombing runs. The destruction was total and immediate. Over the following weeks, British forces systematically dismantled the German fuel supply network, using intelligence derived entirely from Pemberton's document analysis. 7 of the 12 hidden depots were located and destroyed, eliminating over 2 million litres of strategic fuel reserves. The remaining depots were effectively isolated when British operations severed the supply routes connecting them to the main German logistics base in Tripoli. The impact on German operations was immediate and decisive. Rommel's forces, previously capable of rapid movement and aggressive offensive action, found themselves constrained by fuel shortages that limited both tactical flexibility and strategic planning. The anticipated German spring offensive, which British intelligence now understood had been planned as a massive push toward the Suez Canal, was indefinitely postponed as the Afrika Korps struggled to maintain even basic defensive positions. General Claude Auchinleck, commanding British forces in the Middle East, personally commended Pemberton's work in a classified report to London. The intelligence breakthrough achieved through analysis of captured administrative documents has fundamentally altered the strategic balance in North Africa. Enemy capabilities have been reduced from offensive to defensive, and our forces now possess decisive logistical advantages that will prove crucial in future operations. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Pemberton's discovery was how it highlighted the vulnerability of even the most sophisticated military organizations to patient, methodical analysis of routine administrative records. The German Afrika Korps, renowned for its tactical brilliance and operational security, had maintained perfect secrecy regarding its strategic fuel reserves and supply routes through 18 months of intense combat operations. Yet, this elaborate deception was completely unraveled by a former bank accountant armed with nothing more than abandoned paperwork and an obsessive attention to detail. Major Thornton, initially skeptical of the time and resources devoted to document analysis, became one of the technique's strongest advocates. "We've been approaching intelligence gathering like generals when we should have been thinking like accountants," he observed in a training memorandum distributed throughout British intelligence units. The enemy can disguise their intentions and conceal their movements, but they cannot operate without keeping accurate records of fuel consumption, spare parts inventory, and maintenance schedules. These mundane documents contain intelligence goldmines that most officers dismiss as clerical rubbish. The success of Pemberton's analysis led to a complete reorganization of British intelligence priorities in North Africa. Specialized accounting teams were assigned to every major unit, with orders to immediately examine any captured administrative documents for logistical intelligence. Similar analysis techniques were applied to German records captured in Tunisia, Sicily, and eventually throughout the European campaign, consistently providing strategic advantages that traditional intelligence methods had failed to achieve. Pemberton himself remained characteristically modest about his contribution to the conflict, continuing to insist that he had simply applied basic accounting principles to military logistics problems. In a letter to his wife, dated April 10, 1942, he wrote, "The work here is not terribly different from auditing bank records, except that the stakes are considerably higher, and the office conditions are rather more primitive. The Germans, for all their reputation for efficiency, make the same bookkeeping errors as any large organization. and these mistakes provide windows into their entire operational structure. The long-term consequences of the fuel route discovery extended far beyond the immediate tactical advantages gained by British forces. German commanders, realizing that their most sensitive logistical secrets had been compromised through captured paperwork, implemented new security protocols that significantly increased administrative complexity and reduced operational efficiency. The simple act of maintaining accurate records, previously considered routine military housekeeping, became a security liability that required careful balance between operational necessity and intelligence protection. Colonel Friedrich von Zenger und Ettelin, serving as a German staff officer in North Africa, later acknowledged the psychological impact of losing logistical secrecy. When even our fuel consumption records became weapons in the hands of our enemies, we realized that total war had eliminated the distinction between military and administrative functions. Every clerk became a potential source of strategic intelligence, and every ledger entry carried operational security implications. The transformation of the North African campaign following Pemberton's analysis demonstrated how modern warfare had evolved beyond traditional concepts of battlefield intelligence. Technical specifications, production schedules, maintenance records, and supply chain logistics had become as crucial as troop movements and battle plans in determining strategic outcomes. The conflict increasingly resembled a vast accounting exercise where victory belonged to the side that could most efficiently calculate, transport, and deploy industrial resources across global distances. By the summer of 1942, British forces possessed overwhelming logistical advantages that made German defeat in North Africa inevitable. The Afrika Korps, deprived of its strategic fuel reserves and operating under constant threat of supply interdiction, could no longer support the aggressive mechanized warfare that had made Rommel legendary. Instead, German forces found themselves fighting a defensive campaign with inadequate resources, steadily retreating toward Tunisia as British industrial superiority translated into decisive battlefield advantages. The fuel route intelligence also provided crucial insights into German strategic planning for the broader Mediterranean theater. Analysis of shipping schedules and fuel allocation patterns revealed that Germany had never intended to support large-scale operations in North Africa beyond 1942. The limited fuel reserves and inadequate supply infrastructure indicated that German commanders viewed the Afrika Korps as a temporary expedient, designed to support Italian colonial ambitions while Germany focused on the Soviet Union and Western Europe. This realization fundamentally altered British strategic planning for the remainder of the conflict. Rather than preparing for a prolonged defensive campaign in Egypt and the Middle East, British forces could now plan offensive operations designed to accelerate German withdrawal from North Africa and establish launching points for operations against Southern Europe. The ripple effects of Pemberton's document analysis continued throughout the war, as intelligence units applied similar techniques to captured records from every theater of operations. German aircraft production schedules revealed critical material shortages that guided Allied bombing priorities. Submarine maintenance logs exposed operational patterns that improved convoy protection strategies. Even seemingly innocuous personnel records provided insights into German training programs and replacement capabilities that informed strategic planning. Perhaps most remarkably, the success of ledger-based intelligence gathering demonstrated how total war had democratized strategic decision-making in ways that traditional military hierarchies struggled to accommodate. A bank accountant with no formal military training had provided strategic intelligence that eluded experienced professional officers simply by applying civilian analytical skills to military problems. This realization prompted fundamental changes in how armies recruited, trained, and deployed intelligence personnel throughout the remainder of the conflict. Pemberton concluded his service in North Africa in August 1942, when he was transferred to London to establish similar document analysis programs for the planned invasion of Europe. His final report on the fuel route discovery noted that German administrative efficiency, previously considered a strategic advantage, had become a critical vulnerability when those efficient records fell into enemy hands. The German Afrika Korps surrendered in Tunisia on May 13, 1943, after 18 months of increasingly desperate attempts to maintain operations without adequate fuel supplies. Among the captured equipment were detailed logistical records that confirmed every aspect of Pemberton's original analysis, validating the intelligence techniques that had transformed the strategic balance in North Africa. And that concludes our story. If you made it this far, please share your thoughts in the comments. What part of this historical account surprised you most? Don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from World War II and check out the video on screen for another incredible tale from history. Until next time.